My daughter-in-law told her boss I had dementia. She used my name to get paid leave and sympathy. My son believed her. They thought I was slipping. Then I hit record and sent HR the truth she never thought I'd remember. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. I wasn't lost. I was sitting on the patio, listening to the lie echo through the screen door. The ice in my tea had melted. I hadn't touched it in half an hour. Too busy holding still, not breathing, while the voice inside confirmed what I'd feared for weeks. Someone was rewriting my reality. Krista's voice floated out from the kitchen. I could see her through the screen, leaning against the counter like this was just another harmless morning. "Yeah," she said into her phone, her tone casual and amused. She wandered off again. James was freaking out. Might have to tell work she's slipping. Need a break. The laugh that followed didn't match the words. It was light, carefree, like none of this meant anything. I blinked against the early light. My shears sat in my lap, still sticky from trimming roses out by the fence, the ones near the side gate, the ones I'd told her I was going to prune after breakfast. I hadn't wandered anywhere. I'd been exactly where I said I'd be. But Krista was telling someone that her mother-in-law was becoming a burden, an excuse, a condition. My heart knocked once, hard, then again. And then the sound of her voice, so practiced, so casual, dropped into a lower register. "Honestly, it's like babysitting. If I say it's dementia, I can probably get a day or two next week. Mental health day, technically. They're pretty lenient if it's family." A drawer opened. A spoon clinked. I exhaled silently and slipped back into the house through the sliding door, quiet as breath. She didn't see me. I passed through the hallway like a ghost, retreating to the guest bedroom where the morning sun glared through the blinds. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, the bedsheet bunched beneath my palms. James and Krista had been kind to let me stay after my retirement. Temporary, we'd said, just until I found a new place. He had a good job with the city. She worked as some kind of nurse. We weren't close, but there hadn't been tension, until lately, until Krista started correcting me. Until James started asking if I'd remembered to eat. That night after dinner, while James dozed off on the couch and Krista soaked in a tub upstairs, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went into someone else's purse. Her handbag was on the floor by the kitchen bar stool. I opened it carefully, fingertips gentle, like I was handling evidence. And in a way, I was. Tucked between her wallet and a tube of pink lipstick was her work badge. Krista Halpern, RN, Staff Wellness Division, Silverglade Senior Living, a corporate nurse, for a senior care company. I held it like it might burn me. I'd spent 31 years as a medical records specialist in outpatient geriatrics. I've seen what happens when families start playing fast and loose with diagnoses. I've filed complaints. I've flagged paperwork that didn't feel right. I've testified once in a wrongful termination suit that hinged on whether a caretaker falsified notes. So no, this wasn't just a joke. And she wasn't just venting. She knew what she was doing. The next morning, Krista was up early, making her chirpy coffee noises. I stayed in bed, waited. Sure enough, she came into the room with a plastic pill organizer and a too-sweet voice. "Good morning, Helen. Time for meds," she said, holding out the tray like a game show prize. I didn't need help. I'd never needed help. But I smiled, nodded, and took the little cup from her hand. Swallowed the 2 pills inside, vitamin D and a statin I'd taken for 5 years. No confusion, no hesitation. "See? Easy," she said, watching me too closely. I gave her a soft smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "It's nice to be taken care of," I said. She left the room smiling. I waited until I heard the garage door close behind her. Then I went to the kitchen, where the house tablet sat docked near the fridge. Krista always left it open, used it for recipes, groceries, work schedules. She once bragged that she synced her calendar and calls through it. "Everything in one place," she'd said proudly. I tapped the screen. Recent call log. There it was. Outgoing call, 7:52 a.m. Krista Halpern, work line call reason, family medical emergency. I stared at the words. A chill spread across my shoulders, down to the backs of my hands. She wasn't just talking about me, she was documenting me, and now I had proof. But I needed more. She used my mind as an excuse. I used my memory as a weapon. Krista's phone buzzed against the marble countertop while she poured herself a second glass of wine. I was at the table pretending to fumble with my jigsaw puzzle, edges and corners, a lighthouse scene. But I watch. The screen light up. Group chat, brunch bitches. Krista tapped it open. She didn't notice the mirror behind her, angled just enough for me to see her grin. She tried to vacuum the patio again, poor thing. If she forgets my name one more time, I'm calling it early onset. My name is Helen. I don't forget names. I remember the pediatrician who misdiagnosed James with asthma at age 5, the first name of every receptionist I trained before retirement, the exact number of hydrangeas in the side yard, 26, trimmed on a Tuesday. Krista laughed softly at her own text, then picked up her glass and wandered off toward the living room. I stayed still, staring at the reflection of her back until it disappeared. By midnight, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the guest bed, the house quiet except for the mechanical hum of the fridge and the occasional whisper of wind outside the window. My hands twitched. My brain wouldn't stop working. I needed proof. Cold, clinical, undeniable. So I got up. In the hallway closet, above the spare linens, I found the printer. I remembered Krista bragging about its wireless feature and color cartridge. She never expected I'd use it. I returned to my room, booted up my laptop, and typed out a full list of every medication I take, dose, frequency, refill schedule. Then I built a weekly pill log from scratch. It was neat, labeled, accurate, no errors, no confusion. The next morning, Krista peeked her head into the kitchen while I clicked the pill organizer shut. "Need any help this morning?" she asked, voice coated in artificial honey. I didn't look up. "No, thank you," I said. "I'm staying organized now." She blinked once, maybe caught off guard by how sharp I sounded. "That's great," she said, disappearing down the hall. That afternoon, while she was out walking the dog, I texted Daria Weston, my old colleague from the county hospital compliance team. She'd moved on to HR oversight for a senior care conglomerate in Ohio. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but she replied almost instantly. "Me. Quick question. What happens if someone fakes a family member's medical condition to take FMLA? Daria. Depends on who's doing the faking. If it's an employee and they submit a fraudulent claim tied to family medical leave, it's serious. Termination level serious. Possibly insurance fraud." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered. Then I typed again. "Me. What if the condition is dementia?" She didn't answer for a full minute. Then, "Daria. That's even worse. Elder issues are a legal minefield. If she filed anything official, document everything. Fast." My hand trembled slightly, not from age but from something sharper. Purpose. Later that night, while Krista was showering, hot steam curling under the bathroom door, I crept into the home office. She always left the desktop running, logged into the family print server. I opened the browser, typed in FMLA guidelines, and clicked through to the Department of Labor's website. Eligible reasons for leave: serious health condition of employee care for immediate family member with serious condition, mental health coverage under expanded policy. I selected print. The hum of the printer started low and soft behind me. Page after page rolled out. I tucked them into a manila folder and slid it under the mattress in my room. 2 nights later, Krista had a late shift. James had already gone to bed. I waited 10 minutes after her car pulled out of the driveway before entering their bedroom. The top drawer of her desk was locked. The second wasn't. Inside was a stack of documents: insurance forms, pay stubs, onboarding packets, and then, near the back, family medical leave request, temporary dementia, care for immediate relative, signed, stamped, dated 2 weeks ago. My fingers tightened around the edges of the form. I closed the drawer with care, like sealing a casket. She hadn't just said it. She'd filed it. And now I had her handwriting on a lie. They believed her because she was young and employed. I was just the burden on the couch. That's how the world sorts trust. By pay stubs and posture. She had a badge, I had gray hair and time. The notebook I chose was old, leather-bound, and left forgotten in the bottom drawer of the guest room's nightstand. A dusty relic from the days when James still sent handwritten cards on birthdays. The pages had yellowed, but the spine held firm, like me. I started with a date, April 12th, 7:54 a.m. Krista told her friend over speakerphone I was confused again. Activity, folded laundry, matched all socks, accounted for every towel, no confusion, no questions. By the third entry, I added quotes. She asked me where the stove was, Krista said, laughing over wine to her coworker on Tuesday. False. I was asking if the front burner had been repaired. The lies weren't loud, they weren't cruel, they were worse, small enough to dismiss, quiet enough to believe. It didn't take long to notice the pattern. At breakfast, she'd interrupt. She means grapefruit, she'd say when I asked for marmalade. At the pharmacy, she'd correct my birth year. No, Helen, 1955, remember? I would smile, patient, and say nothing, but my pen would remember it all. Dinner that Thursday marked a turning point. The table was quiet except for the gentle scrape of forks and the hum of the dishwasher running behind us. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes. She'd poured James a drink, and herself too. I had the weirdest moment today, she said suddenly, all casual charm. Mom was trying to flip eggs with the spatula we keep in the junk drawer. You know, the old one with the broken handle? I paused mid-bite. The spatula was in the second drawer from the stove, same place it's always been. I used it 2 hours earlier. I didn't, I said calmly. It was right where it belongs. She gave a laugh, forced, thin. Oh, maybe I just didn't see you switch them, she said, already waving the comment away like dust. James looked between us. His expression didn't change, but his eyes settled on me longer than they should have. Not with concern, with pity. I excused myself early that night, claiming a headache. But I wasn't tired, not even close. Back in my room, I sat cross-legged on the bed and flipped to a new page. April 15th. Dinner, 6:42 p.m. Spatula comment. Correction ignored. James silent. I could still taste the bitterness in the gravy. The next few days, the journal grew thick with details, dates, quotes, contradictions. I logged my actions by the hour. I included receipts she didn't know I took, grocery totals, prescription pickups, a bus pass I reloaded myself. Every night I sat with that notebook like a scientist cataloging a rare disease, not dementia, deception. And the patient wasn't me. Sunday afternoon brought guests. Krista's friends from work, 2 nurses and a man in khakis who introduced himself as Just IT. The living room was staged with scented candles and sliced cheese on a cutting board. Krista handed me a cup of tea with 2 hands, smiling like a hospice worker. Mom's been having a few cloudy days, she said with a soft laugh as I walked in. Nothing serious, just hard to see sometimes when it's someone you love, you know? I held her eyes as I took the cup. Thank you, I said. I remember when you still called me Helen. There was a silence. Just long enough. Then came Monday night. James and I were alone in the kitchen. He was rinsing dishes, sleeves rolled up, while I wiped down the counter. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that stretches too long. You've been off lately, Mom, he said without turning around. The cloth in my hand paused. A beat passed, then another. I set it down. Off how? He hesitated. Krista's worried. That maybe you're having trouble. I looked at the back of his neck, his posture, his stiff shoulders. I didn't answer him. I picked up the cloth again and started wiping the same spot I'd already cleaned. He waited for me to say something. I didn't, because I'd already written it down. And if they weren't listening to my words, then they'd read the truth when I delivered it. She knew the rules better than most. That's what made her dangerous. Krista didn't guess her way into this. She didn't fumble into fraud out of desperation. She executed it. Calculated, quiet, and exact. That's what chilled me the most. I sat at the kitchen table with the FMLA form in front of me, the overhead light humming softly above. My fingers hovered above the paper like it might bite. The page was thin, faintly creased at the corners, handled often but folded precisely. Progressive cognitive decline, it read under the medical justification, per primary physician assessment. My primary physician hadn't seen me in over a year. Krista had never once taken me to an appointment, and the last time I had my cognitive testing done was a voluntary screening before I retired. Full marks, not a single red flag. She hadn't stretched the truth, she'd fabricated it. The line for employee's relationship to individual requiring care was filled in clearly. Mother-in-law resides in employee's home temporarily. There was even a checkbox marked time-sensitive. She had made it urgent. I stared at the signature line, Krista Halpern, RN. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't nervous. It was proud. I folded the form along its crease again and slid it back into the drawer, careful not to disturb the other papers around it. My hands were steady. My stomach wasn't. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and dialed Dr. Hensley's office, my former PCP of 15 years. The receptionist recognized my voice immediately, even after 6 months away. Doctor, Hensley doesn't usually do callbacks after 6, but for you, I'll see what I can do, she said kindly. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Helen, the familiar voice came through. Warm, level. What's going on? I kept it simple. Has anyone contacted you, my daughter-in-law or otherwise, about cognitive evaluations or medical records? There was a long pause. Then, no. And if they had, we'd need signed consent from you, Helen. No flags on your chart, no referrals, no notes indicating anything close to cognitive impairment. Your last wellness was spotless. I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. And if someone said otherwise? I asked, my voice flat. Well, he said carefully, if they did so to gain access to benefits or time off, that's a serious legal issue. Fraudulent, possibly even criminal. I thanked him and hung up. The quiet of the room settled like a fog. In the hallway, I could hear Krista laughing faintly at something on the TV, some talk show or competition series, the sound of someone unworried. She had weaponized her credentials. A nurse's signature carried weight. It could bypass suspicion. It could quiet questions. She knew exactly what she was doing, because she knew the system. And she knew how invisible older women became when someone younger said they were slipping. I opened my laptop and logged into the Department of Labor's site again. I read through the FMLA fraud consequences carefully. Internal reviews, terminations, in severe cases, charges. Then I texted Daria. Me. It's worse than I thought. She named a doctor, never saw one. Daria. Did she submit it through a digital portal? Me. Yes. Their internal system. Daria. She'll have a digital trail. Audit teams can track access logs, IPS timestamps. If she signed electronically under false pretenses, it's traceable. Me. What happens next? Daria. You're eligible to file a formal report anonymously. I can show you how. I read the message twice. The weight of it wasn't heavy. It was electric. Krista had built her lie on a form. I was going to tear it apart with facts, line by line, form by form, because I had what she didn't. The truth, and a very long memory. I didn't know it yet, but the clock had already started ticking, and her badge was about to be called into question. She diagnosed me to her employer. I diagnosed her to hers. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was correction, like realigning a crooked picture frame or resetting a bone that had healed wrong. The early morning light cut through the blinds and slats, striping the wall with pale gold. Krista was already gone. Her gym shoes were missing from the entryway, the car from the driveway. That gave me time. Not much, but enough. I pulled the manila folder from beneath the mattress. Inside, the signed FMLA form, the printed internal HR policy I'd quietly pulled from her desktop, my dated pill logs, and 3 pages of handwritten journal entries copied neatly from the original. I'd spent the previous night typing them out, editing for clarity, adding timestamps, and aligning them with Krista's work schedule. Daria had reviewed it all and helped draft the final page, a notarized affidavit confirming I had never received nor required a dementia-related evaluation or diagnosis. But the real nail? A screenshot. Krista's face, blurred slightly in motion, laughing over a wine glass on a Zoom call with her friends. I said she wandered off. They don't check. I got the whole weekend. Daria's tech friend helped me recover the video Krista accidentally left playing on the house tablet's camera app. She hadn't known it was still recording. I uploaded everything through the third-party compliance portal Daria recommended. I was careful. I used the VPN she sent me. The HR intake form allowed for anonymity but required verifiable substantiation. I gave them that. Documented, timestamped, signed, and cited. Before I clicked Submit, I attached one final item, my cognitive evaluation from 6 months ago. Full marks, 30/30, signed by Dr. Emily Hensley, dated, verified. I hit Submit and sat back. The cursor spun for a moment, then a single message flashed across the screen. Your report has been received. You will not be contacted unless follow-up is necessary. And just like that, it was out of my hands. The house was silent, but not empty. It felt full of waiting, like something was going to shift. Soon. 3 days passed. I said nothing. Krista remained sunny, distracted, and loud. Her laughter got sharper, her hands busier. She was always organizing something, restacking already folded towels, straightening coasters, wiping clean counters twice. She didn't know why she felt off, but her instincts were warning her. And mine. Mine were watching. That Thursday, Krista walked in the door at 5:41 p.m., coat slung over one arm, phone pressed to her ear. I was peeling carrots at the kitchen island, slow and steady. She dropped her bag and stopped mid-sentence. Her expression changed. A flicker of something passed through her. Confusion, then discomfort. She dropped her phone into her coat pocket and pulled out a letter. It was sealed in a large, white envelope. Her fingers were tight around it. She didn't speak to me. She walked straight to the bedroom and shut the door, not slammed, just closed, firm and final. I waited 10 minutes, then 15. I could hear nothing. Then, muffled and sharp, her voice, "What the hell is this?" Another pause, her footsteps pacing, paper rustling. A drawer opened, then closed harder than it should have. I turned off the stove. The carrots floated in steaming water behind me. 10 minutes later, she emerged. Her face was pale, not white, gray, as if someone had flipped the saturation switch on her. Her lips were pressed together so tightly it looked like they might split. In her hand was the envelope, now open. The pages inside were bent where she'd clenched them. She tried to speak, didn't. Tried again. "You did something?" she said finally, quiet and shaky. "Didn't you?" I just looked at her. Not smug, not angry, just quiet. She shook her head, more at herself than me, then turned and walked outside. The door didn't close all the way behind her. I could see her through the living room window, gripping the porch railing with both hands. For the first time, she looked like the one slipping. The audit letter had come from her employer's compliance office, a formal notice of internal review, all recent leave claims flagged, records under investigation, no accusations yet, just questions. Lots of them. She had filed her lie in the same system she'd built her career on, and now that system was turning back to look. I watched her stand there, frozen, as the cracks in her story finally started to show, and I hadn't even told James yet. They laughed over Monopoly. I was counting moves. The pieces clicked gently across the board, plastic on cardboard, but I was listening for something else. The crack in Krista's voice, the tremor in her laugh, the space between her words where her confidence used to live. She was losing her grip, and she knew it. Still, she smiled like nothing had changed. The wine flowed. Cabernet. Cheap, but heavy. She filled her own glass twice before the first roll of the dice. "Game night!" she announced brightly, tossing down the lid of the Monopoly box like it was the start of a celebration and not a performance. "Just like old times." James nodded absently and moved the coasters around like it mattered. I could see the lines of fatigue around his eyes, or maybe confusion. He hadn't said much since the letter arrived, and Krista hadn't told him what it was. Not yet. She'd sealed herself in silence, which made her energy tonight feel desperate, too cheerful, too planned. I took the thimble token and placed it at go. Krista handed me my cash like I might forget how to count it. $1,500 to start, Helen. Do you want me to sort it for you? No, thanks, I said softly, folding the bills in neat stacks by denomination. I counted them once. Then again, just to be petty. We played. James sipped his drink. Krista talked too much. About work, about the latest Netflix show, about how exhausted she'd been from juggling too many roles lately. I let her fill the silence. The first time I feigned a confused pause, it was subtle. I landed on income tax and hesitated. Is this the one where you pay the bank or everyone else? Krista jumped in like she'd been waiting for it. It's the bank, Helen, she said quickly. You always pay the bank there. Want me to help you total it? I looked at her blankly. It's 10% or 200, right? She smiled too wide. That's right. You remembered. I nodded slowly, as if the number had returned to me like a distant memory. I even furrowed my brow. She looked pleased. Too pleased. But James glanced over with a flicker of concern. Strike one. Later, when she landed on Boardwalk, I casually asked, "Which color set is that one in again?" Krista leaned across the board, pointed, and began explaining in a soft, syrupy voice, like I was a resident in one of her memory care units. You know what? Why don't I handle your properties and money this round? She offered. I paused, then smiled, folded my hands and said, That's thoughtful. She didn't notice that I wrote something down on my notepad next to my wine glass, just a grocery list if she asked. But the line I penned read, 7:48 p.m., re-explained rules twice, offered to manage money. Tone patronizing. The game dragged on. Laughter came in forced bursts, especially from Krista, whose cheeks were flushed from wine or nerves. I couldn't tell which. She kept checking her phone, then setting it down quickly. Finally, she stood. I'm going to top off my glass, she said, disappearing into the kitchen. The room felt cooler without her in it. James glanced at the empty hallway, then turned to me. His voice was quiet, hesitant. Do you feel okay staying here? I set down my token, met his eyes. I've got things to finish. He nodded, not understanding, but something in him looked relieved, or maybe just bracing. I stayed behind after they'd gone to bed, cleaning up the game pieces and wiping wine rings from the coffee table. I folded the fake money into a perfect square and tossed it in the trash. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and clicked through to the secure email account Daria had helped me set up. Subject, Manipulation Timeline, Verified Attachment, April 16th to April 22nd. Log PDF. Body, Final Update attached. Let me know if additional statements are required. Then I hit send. I didn't need to bluff anymore. Somewhere across town, Krista's name had just landed in a compliance officer's inbox, and this time, the audit wouldn't be quiet. She built her career on compassion. I showed them what it looked like in reverse. And the first rule of real compassion? It doesn't lie to get long weekends and paid leave. It doesn't invent decline for convenience, and it sure as hell doesn't come apart when questioned. The storm didn't start loudly. It began with a single email buried in Krista's inbox. Subject line, HR check-in, confirming FMLA details. She didn't mention it when she got home that night, but I saw her face tighten when she opened her laptop. She stopped chewing mid-bite and reached for her wine glass instead of finishing her sentence about her day. Her fingertips tapped the table, restless. She was unraveling at the edges, one thread at a time. I played it cool. Did dishes. Asked if she needed help with anything. She said no, voice distant, eyes flicking from screen to screen like she was trying to remember a lie she hadn't written down. By the end of the week, Daria texted me from a number she said couldn't be traced. Someone in Krista's unit reached out through back channels. They're reviewing all recent caregiver leave. Your report triggered a system-wide check. 2 days later, another message. One of her coworkers called in a tip. Said Krista's been talking loosely around the nurses' station. I didn't have to ask what that meant, but I did anyway. What kind of talk? Daria responded fast. She joked to someone, "My mother-in-law tried to light the stove with a spoon. I should get hazard pay." I set the phone down, slowly. That particular night I remembered exactly. I'd made chicken piccata, with capers. I used the gas stove just like always, clicked the knob, lit the burner, sautéed each cutlet with lemon and garlic. James had complimented it, said the house smelled like an Italian kitchen. Krista had barely looked up from her phone, but she'd cleared her plate, and now she was telling people I'd tried to set fire to the house? I pulled out the journal. March 30th. Dinner, chicken piccata. All burners turned off by 7:22 p.m. Stove cleaned, spoon never used. I took a picture of the entry and sent it to Daria. Her reply, "Thanks," adding it to their file. They've already flagged her case as inconsistent with self-reported caregiver risk. Krista didn't know yet, but something in her sensed the shift. She started coming home late, avoiding eye contact, cleaning things that were already clean, baseboards, outlet covers, even the dog's water bowl. Her phone lived in her hand. Her voice got sharp, her laugh thinner. Then, one evening, I heard it. James was in the shower. I was reading in the living room when her phone rang. She answered before the second ring. "This is Krista." A pause. "Oh, yes, of course. Now?" Another pause. A different tone now, one she didn't use with us. "Yes, I can make time, I didn't realize it had been escalated." Escalated! She turned her back toward the hallway. I slid my book closed silently. Her voice dropped into something she probably thought sounded controlled. "Sure. Compliance clarification meeting. I'll bring any documentation needed." The words fell like lead weights. She hung up and stood still for a long moment, phone in hand. Then she walked slowly to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine without looking at the bottle, and took a long sip. When James came downstairs, she told him she had an early meeting the next day and went to bed without finishing her dinner. I waited until the house went still. Then I opened my email and added a note to the timeline I'd been building. April 28th. HR escalation confirmed. Language used. Compliance clarification meeting. Likely Phase 2 of internal inquiry. I attached the photo of my journal entry about the stove incident and resent the document under the subject line. Update, journal evidence cross-verified. The house was dark. But upstairs, in a perfectly folded drawer, a badge with Krista Halpern, RN, sat one heartbeat away from being revoked. Tomorrow morning, she'd walk into a room full of people trained to spot liars, and for the first time, she wouldn't be the one taking the notes. She said I forgot conversations. I remembered everything she said, word for word, even the lies she told when she thought no one was listening. Krista walked into the compliance meeting like she still belonged there. Straight spine, scrub top ironed, badge clipped neatly. She wore her mask well, but masks melt under pressure and HR had started applying heat. According to Daria, the meeting was quiet, professional, no raised voices, just questions sharpened by documentation. Krista's defense? "My mother-in-law's been having episodes. She covers it well, but the decline is obvious. She's even tried to hide it from my husband. I didn't want to involve anyone, but I had to step in." Polished, practiced, almost believable. Until HR slid the packet across the table, notarized statements, time-stamped entries, her own internal call logs, screenshots of her mocking my memory. She asked who submitted it. They told her the source was anonymous. She said it had to be a mistake. They pointed to her signature on the form and the medical claim tied to my name. They asked when the diagnosis was made, who the doctor was, and why there were no matching records. She stalled, said the files must have gotten lost in the system, said she thought the evaluation was informal. But HR doesn't traffic in informal. Daria's next text came that afternoon, short and stark. "They're reviewing her license file now." That meant one thing. Escalation. From internal concern to formal investigation. Once a license file is opened, it's more than disciplinary. It's potentially career-ending. That evening, I was at the kitchen counter slicing strawberries for dessert when the door slammed hard enough to rattle the wine glasses in the cabinet. Krista's heels hit the tile like bullets. "Where is he?" she snapped. I turned around slowly. James is at the store. She dropped her bag on the floor, hands shaking with adrenaline or rage. Maybe both. Her cheeks were blotched red. Her eyes had that too bright gleam of someone on the edge. "You went to them," she said. "Didn't you?" I tilted my head, calm. "I don't work there." "Don't get cute with me." Her voice rose. "You're manipulating him. You're poisoning everything." I stepped away from the counter. "If James is confused, it's not because of me. You're turning him against me," she hissed. "You've been playing innocent, but this whole time, you've been plotting something, writing things down, watching me. You're sick, and you've always resented me." The room was quiet, except for the slow whir of the fridge motor. Then I said, "You're right about one thing. I've been watching, but not to hurt you." She took a shaky breath, then barked a short, mirthless laugh. "Don't act like some martyr. You forged this. You made me look like a liar. You did that on your own." Her jaw clenched. She looked around the room like she wanted to throw something but couldn't decide what. "I've worked for everything I have," she snapped. "You don't know what it's like to be exhausted, to hold everything together, to need one damn break." "I know what it's like to be used," I said, and then blamed for needing care I never asked for. Her hands curled into fists. "You don't know what I've done for this family." I reached slowly behind me to where my phone sat face down next to the cutting board. I tapped the button once, flipping on the voice recorder app, then gently set it on the counter between us. "I think it's time you start saying things out loud that you're willing to live with," I said. She froze, stared at the phone. Her lips parted slightly, then closed again. She didn't touch it, didn't walk away either. We stood there, breathing in the thick silence, me steady, her cornered. This wasn't care, this wasn't stress, this was exposure, and she knew it. She turned toward the hallway, but not before muttering something I hadn't expected. It was only supposed to be one day. She didn't know she was narrating her own downfall. Sometimes the most damning testimony doesn't come from cross-examination. It comes from someone who thinks no one is listening. Krista's footsteps creaked upstairs. I sat still at the kitchen table, phone in hand, voice recorder app blinking red in the corner of the screen. She'd just said the words, casual, under her breath, like they didn't matter. It was only supposed to be one day. But one lie never stays small. It's like mold. It spreads in the quiet, infects everything it touches. I didn't stop the recording. I let the silence stretch, waited. And then, from the hallway, her voice again, muffled but audible. "God, I'm the one who needs the care around here, seriously. This woman acts like she's fine, but she rewrites everything in her head. It's exhausting." A pause. Then a bitter little laugh. "I swear, I only said she was confused one time, just so I could take a day off. They act like I burned down a hospital." She opened the fridge. Bottles clinked, the crack of a soda can opening. Her voice came again, closer now, as she spoke to herself. "Ridiculous. Everyone fakes it a little. I didn't mean for it to go this far." That was the moment I knew. She still thought she had control. She walked past the kitchen without noticing me. I stayed in the shadow of the dining nook, tucked beneath the dim ceiling light, back straight. Breath steady. She didn't see the phone, didn't see the red circles still pulsing. 10 minutes later, after she'd gone upstairs, I plugged my earbuds into the phone and played it back, twice. The audio was clear. Her voice rose and dipped in waves, the kind of self-justifying monologue that happens when no one is supposed to be listening. I emailed the file to myself under a generic subject line, "Audio log, April 29th, kitchen recording." Then I created a new message to Daria. Subject, critical evidence, self-incrimination recording. Body, Daria, caught this tonight. Unedited, time-stamped, clear audio. Krista confirms misrepresentation of condition, intent behind the FMLA filing, and admits to workplace deception. File attached. Let me know what happens next. I hit send. The next morning was strangely still. Krista didn't come down for breakfast. James left early. I sat on the patio with a fresh cup of coffee and a strange feeling in my chest. Not anger, not even satisfaction. Something colder, like the hush before a long-awaited storm. At noon, my email dinged. From Daria Weston. Subject, critical evidence. Helen, this is exactly what they needed. The audio confirms deliberate misrepresentation of a family member's medical condition, plus ongoing misconduct via internal communications. Her employer has escalated to formal disciplinary review. I can't disclose details, but your documentation has triggered internal protections for others who've reported similar manipulation. More than that, you've set a precedent. Thank you. Daria. I sat with that last sentence for a long time. You've set a precedent, not just for Krista, for anyone like her, for the ones who weaponized caretaking as currency, who told lies about people too quiet or too tired to defend themselves. The front door opened. Krista walked in, phone to her ear, face pale, moving like her shoes were too heavy. She stopped mid-step when she saw me at the table. Her eyes darted to my phone, then back to my face. She ended her call without a word and set the phone down. Something happen? I asked, voice even. She hesitated. Then, they're reviewing my file. What file? She looked at me sharply. They said I'll get a formal notice this week. There's going to be a hearing, compliance, licensing, everything. I nodded, slow. Did they say why? She stared at me. You know why. I didn't blink. I'm just the woman on the couch, remember? She opened her mouth, closed it, then picked up her phone and walked back out the front door. She still hadn't figured out that the moment she called me confused was the moment she handed me the power to prove otherwise. That night, I opened my email again. A new message had arrived. From HR Compliance Officer, Silverglade Senior Living Subject, Formal Acknowledgement, Case 82219. Ms. Thompson, thank you. Your evidence has protected others in similar situations. We will follow up with updates as allowed under policy. Your submission has been instrumental in verifying critical patterns of misconduct. Sincerely, Compliance Office. I leaned back, eyes closed, as a new thought took shape. If she'd done this to me, who else had she done it to? She spread a lie to her friends. I sent the truth to her boss. And the truth, once released, doesn't crawl back into silence. It travels. It multiplies. It sticks. The official email came on a Monday afternoon. Krista was sitting on the back porch with her tablet, sun high and sharp over the patio umbrella, her legs crossed like she had nowhere to be. Because now, she didn't. Subject, status update, compliance review. Case 82219, body, Krista Halpern has been placed on temporary suspension pending the outcome of the internal investigation. She is not to report to work or contact clients until further notice. I printed the email quietly, folded it twice, and slid it between the pages of my journal. No celebration, just confirmation. That night, the air in the house was brittle. James barely touched his food, pork tenderloin with roasted apples, and didn't meet anyone's eyes. Krista barely spoke. When she did, her voice was tight, every word a small act of control. James finally looked up. So, you're not working this week? Krista reached for her glass of water, her hand perfectly still. It's not permanent. They just need time to review things. Review what? He asked, blunt. A flicker of something had cracked in him since the audit letter. He wasn't angry yet, but he was curious. And Krista didn't like curious. She stared at her plate. Someone's making things look worse than they are. James frowned. Is that the same someone who sent your HR team a notarized statement? And audio recordings? I didn't speak. I buttered a roll, slow and even. Krista glared at me. You think this is normal, James? That your own mother wants to humiliate me? She didn't go to them, he said, eyes flicking my way. They came to her. Silence, just the clink of a fork falling against porcelain. I'd rather be alone with truth, I said, not raising my voice, than surrounded by people who need lies to love me. Krista pushed her chair back and left the room. James stayed seated. The next day, she received a call from one of her former clients. I overheard her side of it through the wall, her voice strained, polite, rehearsed. No, I completely understand. I'm sorry you heard it that way. Yes, of course. I'll remove my name from your references. Thank you for calling. Click. Another loss. Later that night, as I read on the porch, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring twice before answering. Hello? Hi, is this Helen Thompson? Yes. My name's Margot Vance. I'm with the Sentinel. I report on elder advocacy and workplace abuse. I've been following a developing case involving a caregiver under FMLA review. Your name came up. I stood, walked slowly into the house. How exactly did it come up? I can't reveal my source, but a whistleblower forwarded internal documents related to a falsified dementia claim. Your statements were referenced as part of the evidence trail. I didn't speak. The voice softened. I'm not asking you to go on record. Not yet. But I believe your story matters. And I believe others may have experienced the same thing, silently, without proof. What are you asking? A conversation. Off the record. Just your perspective. You won't be quoted. I just want to understand what it's like. From your side of the table. I looked out the window. Krista was pacing the backyard on another call. Her shoulders were hunched. She looked smaller lately, but not because she was shrinking, because the mask was slipping. All right, I said. Off the record. Thank you, the reporter said. This might help a lot more people than you think. We set a time. I hung up. I didn't look at Krista when I passed her on the way upstairs. I didn't need to, because the narrative she'd crafted, the fragile mother-in-law, the caregiver heroine, was no longer hers to control. And the world? It was starting to listen. As I turned off the bedroom light, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. She did the same thing to my dad. I was declining in patience, not memory. There's a difference between forgetfulness and restraint. One is involuntary, the other is earned, sharpened over years of swallowing what you want to say. The video call started promptly at 10 a.m. I sat at the small desk in the guest room, hair pinned back, wearing my oldest pearl earrings. Not to impress, just to remind myself that I was still me, still the same woman who ran an entire medical records department with nothing but a clipboard and instinct. Margot's face appeared on screen, framed by bookshelves and a desk lamp. She looked younger than I expected, maybe late 30s, but her voice carried experience. Steady, intentional. Is this still off the record? I asked, first thing. Yes, she said. Unless you choose otherwise? I nodded. Then let's begin. I didn't rush. I told the story the way it happened, with the measured cadence of someone who's had time to relive every moment. From the roses on the patio, to the email printouts, to the fake FMLA letter in Krista's drawer. Every detail was slow, deliberate, clean. She didn't interrupt. She typed notes occasionally, but let me speak. When I got to the part about the recorded audio, Krista's own voice admitting to the fabrication, Margot leaned forward slightly, brows pinched. Do you still have that file? She asked. I sent it to HR, but I also have a backup. Would you be willing to let me hear a portion of it? I clicked into my encrypted folder and played the 30-second clip that mattered most, the one where Krista muttered, I only said she was confused one time, just to get one day off. Margot didn't react until it ended. Then she sat back and said, We usually hear these stories from caregivers who are overwhelmed and break under the weight. We don't often hear from the people being used. I looked at her squarely. Because most of them don't realize it's happening, or if they do, no one believes them. She was quiet for a second. Then she spoke slowly, like she'd already turned this into a lead. Did you know elder abuse tied to FMLA loopholes is practically invisible in public data? Companies rarely report it. Victims are often family, and confusion is the easiest excuse in the book because you can't prove you didn't forget something. I did, I said, every day. In writing, she nodded. We talked for an hour. She asked for permission to verify certain things, the timestamps on my journal, the dates on Krista's HR filings, the name of my doctor. Can I speak to your physician? She asked. She already verified there's no diagnosis on record. You'll have to go through her office. I will. At the end of the call, she smiled faintly. You've done something most people your age are never allowed to do. Take the narrative back. If you ever want to go on the record, I'll think about it, I said. We said our goodbyes. I closed the laptop. By the time evening came, the house was too quiet. James worked late, again. Krista had retreated into her office upstairs, the door shut, blinds drawn. I'd stopped trying to read her silence. Around 9:30, I made tea and curled into the corner of the couch. I flipped through a library book and tried to ignore the tension vibrating through the drywall. My phone buzzed just after 10. Unknown number, link enclosed. I tapped it. The Sentinel website loaded. The headline ran bold across the top of the page. Caregiver lies about relatives' health for paid leave. A pattern of silence and manipulation in senior care. My chest tightened, not with fear, with something deeper, something like justice. I scrolled slowly. The article was careful with details, no names, no cities. But the story was unmistakable. A woman claimed her live-in relative was experiencing cognitive decline. She used that claim to request extended leave under FMLA. She faked a diagnosis, misled her employer. Her mother-in-law kept quiet, until she didn't. Then came the part that stopped me cold. Other sources confirm this was not the first time the caregiver manipulated elder narratives for personal gain. I blinked, reread it. Not the first time. The words felt heavier than anything I'd read so far, because it meant the reporter had found more, that Krista's lie wasn't isolated, and that she wasn't done falling. As I sat in the dark, my phone buzzed again, this time with a name I didn't recognize and a single message. She ruined my father's care plan in 2021. I've been waiting for someone like you. She said I was going through a phase, but it was the end of hers. The word came on a Thursday morning, folded neatly inside a plain white envelope, hand-delivered by certified courier. Krista signed for it without comment, took it into her office, and didn't come out for 3 hours. I stayed seated in the sunroom, coffee growing cold, pretending to read the newspaper while every minute stretched tighter across the silence. When she finally emerged, her face was raw. Not from crying. Krista wasn't someone who cried in front of others. It was the look of someone whose armor had finally cracked and found nothing underneath it. She walked past me without a word. The paper in her hand trembled only slightly. She went to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and tore her nursing badge in half over the trash can. No ceremony, no speech, just a soft plastic snap that echoed louder than any apology. Later that day, the email came through. Daria forwarded it with a brief subject line, "License suspended, confirmed." The body of the message was even shorter. Ethics Board reached decision. License suspended indefinitely. No further details permitted due to privacy laws, but your documentation made this possible. I closed the email and stared out the window. Krista didn't work late anymore. She didn't work at all. She spent her days making long calls behind closed doors, sending out resumes to places that wouldn't call back, and checking the mailbox like salvation might arrive in a manila envelope. But the world was quieter now. And when lies stop echoing, what's left behind is often silence. The night James broke was the night the house finally felt real again. We were in the kitchen, the three of us eating dinner like it was any other day. Pork chops, garlic potatoes. I'd cooked because no one else had moved to. Krista said nothing. Her fork moved mechanically. James didn't even pretend. Halfway through the meal, he set his fork down, hands trembling slightly. "I didn't know," he said, not looking at either of us. Krista looked up sharply. "Don't start." James cut her off. "Number, I didn't know, and that's the point. I didn't ask. I just assumed you were tired and she was slipping." His eyes met mine. Shame, confusion, love that had taken a beating. "I should have asked you directly." "You're asking now," I said. He nodded, and then, barely above a whisper, "I'm sorry, Mom." I reached over and touched his hand, not with forgiveness, but something gentler, recognition. Krista stood abruptly and left the table. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway. A door slammed. Dishes clinked as she moved something aggressively in the sink. James stared at the empty seat she left behind. "I don't even know who she is anymore," he said. I did. I always had. I left the next morning. No grand goodbyes, no packed minivan, just a suitcase, a rideshare booked from my phone, and a letter left under James's coffee mug. He wasn't up yet. Krista didn't come out of her room. I stepped outside into the chill spring air, the scent of cut grass and cold pavement rising up to meet me. The driver helped with my bag, and as the car pulled away, I didn't look back. The city moved around us, coffee shops opening, buses groaning awake, people on sidewalks rushing toward whatever they thought mattered. I felt weightless. Hours later, James would find the envelope and open it in the quiet kitchen, the house still carrying the tension that no longer belonged to me. Inside was one sentence, written in my neat cursive. "Next time someone tells you I'm lost, ask where they left me." And 2 towns over, a consulting agency had just received an anonymous tip warning them not to hire Krista Halpern, and attached a public link to the article that started it all. She used my name to fake a crisis. I used hers to report a real one. And this time, she couldn't hide behind a badge. There was no employer to shield her, no HR portal to manipulate. She'd stepped out of the system and straight into the light. 3 weeks after I moved out, Krista resurfaced. Not back in a clinic, not licensed, but as something slipperier, an independent elder care consultant. I found the profile on a late-night whim, searching her name on a referral platform for family caregivers. Her photo was new, cropped tight, soft lighting, a little blur. The description underneath it made my jaw tighten. Compassionate caregiver offering personalized in-home wellness plans for aging adults, specializing in dementia support, care coordination, and transitional services. No mention of her suspension, no mention of ethics violations. Just a pretty summary and a glowing fake review about how understanding she was. The truth wasn't just being hidden, it was being rewritten again. I copied the profile link and opened a new browser tab. The State Health Licensing Board had an online reporting tool. I uploaded the Sentinel article. I entered the dates of her license suspension. I included a screenshot of her profile and flagged the keywords dementia support and transitional planning. Then, in the section marked additional comments, I typed a single sentence: "If she faked care once, how many others are still trusting her now?" I didn't sign it. The next morning, the consulting site took down her profile. No warning, no appeal, just a 404 error where her soft-lit smile used to be. But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, my phone buzzed as I was watering the potted herbs outside my new apartment. A number I didn't recognize. No voicemail. Then a text followed. She did the same thing to my mother. No name, no explanation. I stood frozen, hose still trickling at my feet. My breath caught. I typed back, "Who is this?" 3 dots. Then, "My name is Dana." I saw the article. In 2021, Krista was assigned to my mom's facility after surgery. She told the staff my mom was slipping, told me to consider early memory care options. It scared me. I almost moved her. Then a nurse pulled me aside and told me the tests were clean. I filed a complaint. Nothing happened. No one followed up. I stepped inside, sat down at the kitchen counter, phone still in hand. My heart was thudding, not from panic, from confirmation. Krista hadn't started with me. I was just the one who refused to stay quiet. I replied, "Would you be willing to talk to the reporter who broke the story?" Dana answered instantly, "Yes. I've been waiting for someone to believe me for 2 years." Later that night, I opened my journal. Not the one Krista had never seen. A new one. Fresh. Clean. The first page wasn't a timeline. It was a list of names. Daria, Margot, Donna, mine. I didn't know how long the list would grow. I just knew it wouldn't end here. And neither would her consequences. Krista had used vulnerability like currency, traded it for days off, leverage, sympathy. She'd said the right buzzwords in the right rooms and been rewarded for it. But buzzwords don't hold up under truth, and paper masks disintegrate in the rain. What she didn't count on was that one of her so-called declining patients knew how systems worked, knew what ethics violations looked like, knew where the real records lived and how to weaponize them without ever raising her voice. That was the thing about pretending someone's broken. Eventually, they stop pretending not to be whole. I closed the journal, poured tea, sat by the window. The email from Margot came just before midnight. Just got off the phone with Dana. Her story matches yours. We're filing a follow-up. You weren't the only one. And you might not be the last. My phone buzzed again, this time with a photo. A grainy shot of Krista at another facility's front desk, clipboard in hand, name tag facing away. The message read, "Is this her? She's trying again." She questioned my memory. I built a case she can't forget. When someone tells the same lie often enough, they start to believe it. And when the truth speaks softly, they mistake it for weakness. They always underestimate quiet women. 3 months had passed since Krista's consulting profile vanished, since the photo of her at that facility landed in my inbox. I never confirmed it was her, but the shape of denial doesn't change. Not in posture, not in strategy, not in people who refuse to see themselves, and I had stopped waiting for her to admit anything. Instead, I turned my attention elsewhere. It started with a call from Margot. "I've been contacted by 2 more families," she said. "Same pattern, manipulation of elder cognitive health, intimidation, silence. They didn't document it the way you did, but they remember the gaslighting." I sat at my kitchen table, a pen between my fingers, not writing yet, just listening. "We're working with an advocacy nonprofit," she continued. "They're forming a task force to document these cases. Would you consider helping? You don't have to be public. They need someone who understands systems." I didn't hesitate. "Send me the name." The group was called Family Truths, small but growing. Lawyers, retired nurses, adult children of victims, and a few brave elders who were tired of being treated like they were fading just because they didn't shout. I joined anonymously at first. Under the name HT, I shared the structure I used, the daily journal logs, the medication checklist, the audio template, the timeline format. They turned it into a downloadable guide. Case managers started forwarding it to vulnerable seniors. One email from a program coordinator said it best, "This isn't just documentation, it's armor." I started reviewing redacted complaint forms from others, women in Arizona, Florida, Michigan. Stories different in detail, identical in harm. Sometimes it was a niece, sometimes a neighbor, sometimes a paid aide, but the pattern was always the same: assumed decline, erased agency. They called it gray gaslighting, and it was spreading. I helped them build a checklist for care recipients. Document everything. Record with consent where legal. Keep a backup off-site. Track tone changes, not just facts. When in doubt, timestamp your clarity. What Krista had done, what she thought she got away with, was no longer just her story. It was a model of what not to do, of what to see before it's too late. In May, the nonprofit launched a private online portal for caregivers and elder advocates. They called the training program "The Mind They Underestimated." I never asked if the title came from my journal. One morning, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just a neatly typed note on thick cream stationery. "Your logs are now part of our curriculum. One of your phrases, 'If they say I'm confused, check where they left the truth,' is printed on the resource packet. Thank you for proving that memory is not just a function. It's a form of resistance." It was the only letter I've ever kept under glass. I hadn't spoken to Krista. Not since the morning I left. James had called once, quiet, guilty. He said she was trying to start over. I didn't ask where. I didn't need to, because what she left behind wasn't mine to carry anymore. My new apartment overlooked the park. Every afternoon I sat by the window, journal open, watching people walk their dogs or chase toddlers in circles. Life in motion, not forgetting, just forward. That night, my email pinged. From Margot Vance. Subject, request to appear. Helen, the task force is holding a panel at the National Elder Advocacy Conference. We'd like to invite you to speak. On record, you won't be alone. Several other victims turned whistleblowers will be there. You changed the shape of this fight. You deserve to be part of its voice. Let me know. Margot. I stared at the words for a long time, then opened a new document and typed the first line of the speech I never thought I'd give. They adjusted the mic twice before I spoke. Not because it didn't work, but because I needed a moment to breathe. The lights above the podium were bright, and the room below was full of strangers. some sitting tall in folding chairs, others leaning forward, hands clasped, eyes expectant. And I realized something. They weren't waiting to be impressed. They were waiting to feel seen. It was the final day of the National Elder Advocacy Conference, the last session. The room smelled faintly of coffee and faint nerves, stale air and human hope mingling in recycled carpet. Some wore name tags, others just wore guarded expressions. Most were older, a few were not. All had a reason to be here. I looked down at my note cards, then set them aside. "My name is Helen Thompson," I said, my voice even. "I'm 69 years old. I like crossword puzzles, I drink too much Earl Grey, and until a few months ago I lived with my son and his wife." Soft laughter rippled through the front rows. I let it land. "What I'm about to tell you," I continued, "has happened to people in this room. Maybe it's still happening. Maybe no one's believed you yet. Maybe you've been told you're forgetful, sensitive, or worse, confused." Silence now. Stillness. I paused. My memory was never the problem, but someone's conscience was. The story flowed from me like breath now, natural, unforced. I didn't use names. I didn't have to. I talked about the form Krista filled out, the medication logs, the fabricated stories, the night she accused me of losing the spatula that never left its drawer. I described the slow gaslighting, the public corrections, the staged over-explanations. I detailed the FMLA abuse, not as a legal bullet point, but as an emotional breach. The theft of trust. The exploitation of care. I played a 10-second audio clip, not Krista's most damning, just her most revealing. I only said she was confused one time, just to get a day off. The room didn't gasp. They didn't need to. They nodded. I finished with the headline, "Caregiver Lies About Relatives' Health for Paid Leave," and then I said the part that mattered most. She gave them a lie. I gave them a legacy. There was a pause, deep and complete. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights, the scratch of someone adjusting their coat in the back row. Then came the first clap, then another, then a wave. Not applause for performance, applause for recognition. When they quieted, I leaned into the mic one last time. If someone tries to make your silence look like confusion, speak, loudly, clearly, with receipts if you have them. And if you don't, start writing them today. Then I stepped back, shoulders square, spine straight. As I crossed the stage, I caught sight of a man standing near the exit, mid-60s, glasses tucked in his shirt pocket. His eyes were glassy. He mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded once and kept walking. Outside, the late afternoon sun was low and warm on my back. I found a bench near the parking lot and sat down, taking in the movement around me. Voices, cars, birds high above in flight, life, relentless and loud. I pulled out my phone and saw a new message from Margot. "The piece is getting picked up by a larger outlet. They want to expand it into a series. You started something." I smiled, small and quiet. Another message followed, this one from the Family Truths Task Force. "We'd like to turn your seminar into a digital training for caregivers and family members. Same title, The Mind They Underestimated. You okay with that?" I was. I sat there a while longer, letting the sun soak into my skin, the air into my lungs. I hadn't just survived being erased. I'd drawn a line through their lie and written something better over it. A record, a reminder, and a roadmap for the next woman who needed it. They diagnosed me to disappear me. I remembered too much to let them.